Okay, so just a little housekeeping today. If you want a copy of today's presentation or you want a recording of it, just reach out to your salesperson and they can provide those links to you. As we go through the slides, feel free to send in questions. To do that, use the Q&A box and send the questions via Q&A. I may or may not be able to get to them until the end of the presentation, but I will get to them eventually at some point. Don't raise your hand, don't send it in via chat. Q&A is the box I'm going to be able to see. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Today's presentation is all about Nebula. Nebula is our cloud managed network platform. And for those of you that haven't joined one of mine before, for whatever reason, my computer really bogs down when we're recording. So occasionally here, there's going to be some long pauses between slides as I wait for the transition to actually execute here on my side. So we'll start off with a little background on Zyxel in case you're new to who we are. Zyxel has been making computer networking equipment since 1989. We got started back in the days of 9600 baud modems, 19.2 modems, making the modems that would be used in early internet service provider dial-in modems. So they'd be the modems that would be in the call center that you would dial into from your home, primarily also used for bulletin board systems. From there, we expanded into ISDN, DSL, cable modems, and from there into business networking equipment, everything from low-end switches to high-end metro area switches, core switches, security firewalls, wireless access points, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, we've been doing wireless now since before there was 802.11a, b, g. We had devices back in the day that were just called 802.11 with no letter added onto them. So anyways, 30 years of doing this for you guys. We've got several million devices deployed out in the field. So moving on here to Nebula. This is just kind of showing you a summary of what Nebula is in case you haven't heard this a million times already. But the idea behind it is to provide centralized and unified control and monitoring for switches, access points, and your security gateways. Zero-touch provisioning. So on most networks, there should be no installation or configuration that's done other than mounting them, plugging them in, and giving them power and Ethernet connectivity. There's no software that needs to be installed. All management is done through the cloud through a web interface, although we do have an app that makes some things a little bit easier for you, especially installers. The cloud management platform itself, the basic version, is free. So there's no cost, there's no limitation on the number of devices or the number of customers you can manage with the free version of the software. Later on in the presentation, we'll go through some of the key differences between the free version and the Pro Pack that we offer as a paid upgrade. So from a solution components perspective, we have the hardware itself, switches, security gateways, access points, the mobile app, and then we have what we call Nebula Control Center. So that is the web interface that you are using in the cloud portion that does the management and monitoring. So we'll talk just a little bit here about why cloud managed networks. You can see there's 5 different items here. Main takeaways are it should give you lower combined running costs. It allows you to save time by making it let you work smarter and faster. Remote access anywhere you or your technicians are, as long as they've got internet connectivity. Built-in scalability and redundancy, so the network doesn't go down, the management platform doesn't go down. And probably one of the big reasons why a lot of people are moving to the cloud is increased security. The Nebula Control Center is updated weekly. The latest patches and improvements. We make it easy to centralize firmware upgrades and schedule those when it's convenient for you. So you're making sure the network is always up on the latest security patches, both the hardware and the management platform. So there's a lot less you have to do, and basically we take care of all that for you. So this is just showing here on this slide the things that go into installing the network, buying the hardware, installing the equipment, figuring out how you're going to do monitoring, how you're going to do remote access, what monitoring platform you're going to use, data storage, you know, doing your setting changes and applying those, and user and device management. So when we take this to the cloud, we'll see the same graph here, but everything that's colored in green is something we're moving it into the cloud, either simplifies the matter, reduces costs from a configuration standpoint, or reduces costs from a purchase standpoint to save you time and money. And that's the main takeaway here. So by moving into a cloud platform, there's less installation configuration that needs to be done when you're doing the installation. There's no monitoring, secondary monitoring you need to do. The cloud handles that for you. The cloud handles remote access for you. The cloud acts as your monitoring platform. The cloud stores your logs for you and your user databases if you so choose, and dramatically simplifies applying changes, making changes, doing firmware updates. So big savings as far as time, effort, and money. So we'll go through here and hit some of the highlights and what's inside Nebula for you. So setup without unboxing. Most of our Nebula equipment out there has a QR code. The QR code is located both on the belly label of the device, and it's also located on the outside of the box. So to set up a device, literally all you do is scan in that QR code, assign it to your customer and which site that customer is going to have, that the hardware is going to be installed on, and that's it. It'll automatically, once it gets power, plug in and download the settings for that customer in that location. If you don't want to use the QR codes, you can manually type in a serial number and MAC address to do the registration and assign it to the customer that way. But the nice thing about this is because the QR code's on the outside of the box, you can have equipment shipped to you, you can scan it in and then ship it out to the customer location. You don't need to take anything out of the box to pre-configure or plug in and wait for it to boot up and do updates or things like that. Nebula takes care of all of that for you. Getting the site itself up and running literally just takes a few minutes. For just the basic connectivity, probably the thing that takes the most amount of time is setting up a My Zyxel account. If you don't already have one, although if you're already a Zyxel reseller and selling our firewall products, you probably already do. After that, most of the basic settings are configured automatically on the fly for you. So you'll get basic connectivity, and then you just need to go in and customize things such as security keys, you know, SSIDs, firewall rules, things like that. So for a basic site, you can get up and running literally in about 5 minutes. So again, there's no additional hardware that needs to be installed. There's no cloud keys. There's no wireless LAN controllers. There's nothing like that. The device themselves automatically reaches out to the cloud, and then you manage all of that through a web interface. So you can do it on a mobile device. You can do it on a computer, anywhere that's got internet access. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the mobile app. So one of the main uses of this is just to scan in the QR codes. You can also use this when you're doing the install, have your installer take photos of where the hardware is being installed. So that way, if somebody has to go on site, you know, 6 months or 2 years down the road, you can pull it up on the mobile app, the device you're going out to service, and you can see a photo of where that device was installed. It also gives you a brief overview so you can see what's going on all of your customer accounts, what's going on at their sites. You can get alerts automatically sent to you through the app. So if a device goes offline and there's some other network issue, you get notified about it immediately through the app. The app right now, currently, just from a configuration standpoint, gives you access to some of the wireless LAN settings, but it doesn't have the full configuration options available, and that's probably going to be true because it just clutters up and it's difficult to do on the app. So a lot of the configuration is going to remain needing to use a web interface to do that. And we get asked this a lot. We do have captive portal functionality built in for guest access. This can be done just on the access points on a per SSID basis. So if you're just providing a guest network at an office, you can do that on the access points. If you're looking to provide guest access both for wired and wireless users, such as like a hotel or MDU deployment, our security gateway, the NSG series, it also has the captive portal functionality, which you can apply across the network. It's really flexible, so you have the ability to go in there and customize what that landing page looks like. You can load up your own logos and stuff. If the templates that we have on there and what you see is what you get editor isn't enough of the customization, you can download the HTML and CSS files, customize them to your heart's content, and then re-upload them back into the cloud. You can point it to your own server if you want to do something on your own server, such as capture additional information that Nebula doesn't let you do. And then from a login perspective, we have a terms of service page. You can require users to log in with a username and password. You can have users register and create their own username and register using their email address. You can do Facebook login, so you can have them log in with their Facebook account, and then you get the information that Facebook shares. So really flexible as to how you want to do guest access. Our captive portal also allows you to provide this separate guest network, even on networks where you don't have access to the switches, or the switches don't support VLAN. So we can isolate those guest wireless users without needing VLAN access on the network. So that's another cool feature we have in there. Now we'll start showing sort of what the GUI looks like. So this is the main view you're going to see here. This is what we call our MSP view. So you see there, you get a breakdown of all of the customers you have. We call them organizations. So each customer would be an organization. It'll show you whether they're using the free version of Nebula or whether they're using the paid version of Nebula. If they're using the paid version, when that license is going to expire, how many sites each organization has, and the status of the devices on there. How many are online, how many are offline. From there, you choose your customer or organization, and it takes you to the org view. So you can see there we've got Google Maps integration, so you can have the individual customer sites show up as where they are physically located on the map. And then you'll get a breakdown of each site under that customer, the name of the site, how many devices are online, what's going on as far as the devices go. And then from there, you click onto the site you want to manage, and it takes you to this dashboard view. We've got two versions of this dashboard. If you're just using Nebula to manage a wireless network, we have a dedicated wireless dashboard. If you're using Nebula for switches and the security gateway as well, we've got this more full-featured view where you can quickly see how many switches and access points and gateways are assigned to that site, how many are currently online. You can see the site's PoE budget and what the current utilization of that PoE budget is, how many wireless users are on the network. And then if you're using our NSG gateways, we actually break down application bandwidth usage. So you can see how much bandwidth is being used and which specific applications are using that bandwidth. You know, if somebody watching a lot of YouTube and that's what's slowing down the network, is BitTorrent going on there? Is that what's slowing down your network? You can see that. You can also see your top 3 users as far as bandwidth utilization goes. So you can see who's hogging up that bandwidth. And then from this interface here, then you go in to monitor and manage all the individual devices. So you can see here we have a dedicated configuration log. This will be stored in the cloud for up to 1 year. It tracks all configuration changes that are made and who made those changes. So each one of your network administrators or employees can have their own account. So that way you can always go back, find out who made the change, and talk to them and find out why they made that change when you're troubleshooting something down the road. You've got a built-in misconfiguration protection. This is really helpful when you're doing VLANs or IP changes to make sure none of the equipment goes offline or becomes unreachable. I'm sure anyone that's been doing a lot of work with VLANs has had that experience where you screw something up and suddenly you lose access to a big chunk of your network. You've got to go on site to reset things. So with Nebula, when you apply your changes, it sees what those changes are. It makes sure to apply those changes in the proper order so nothing goes offline. And if we see you've done something that's going to take the device offline, we automatically roll back to the previous known working settings for you. So you don't have to worry about accidentally taking your access points or a section of your network offline. Firmware updates are all scheduled for you. So we push those out. We try to limit firmware updates to once per quarter. Obviously, if there's a major security issue, we'll push something out sooner than that. But generally, we try to hold off on feature enhancements and improvements on a reduced basis with Nebula. But once those are ready to roll out, those will roll out on a set time that you set. By default, I believe it's Sunday at 2 a.m. You can go in and set your own schedule, so what time works best for your customer when connectivity may go offline temporarily as they do those firmware updates. You can schedule it on a device type basis. You can have a different schedule for your gateway versus your access points and your switches, as well as just choosing to push out the firmware update when you're ready, just to push the button there. So we've got the ability here, like I was talking about before, to put individual sites for your customers on a map as to where they're located. You can also load in a floor plan and drag and drop individual devices onto that floor plan so you can see where they were installed or where they were supposed to have been installed. We have this automatic topology view, so we'll automatically go through and map out for you which devices are connected to which switches, which are connected to which other switches, so you can quickly see how things are connected and then where something is having issues at. We've got a number of live tools to let you see what's currently going on the network and help troubleshoot certain issues that you're having. So the setup process for Nebula is really simple. You plug in the device, make sure it has power and an internet connection. Log in and register the devices either using the app or using your web browser. And then you assign them to a customer site and do the configuration. And you can do these 3 steps in any order. So you can scan in the devices before you even ship them out to the customer site. Before you even order the devices, you can set up the customer site and start messing with the configuration so it's ready to go once the hardware arrives, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 3 steps. You can do them in any order. So now we'll talk about a little bit about some of the individual devices themselves. On the security side of things, we've currently got 4 different models in our NSG series. NSG 50 and 100 just have 1 WAN port. NSG 200 and 300 have dual WAN, so you can do load balancing and failover. Otherwise, the main differences are just horsepower, how much throughput you can get through them. So when trying to judge what size NSG you need, the main thing to be looking at is, are you going to be using the UTM functionality? So that's your antivirus, your intrusion detection and prevention, content filtering, application patrol, those type of things. So you take a look at that and take a look at their internet speed and see which device is giving you the throughput that you need based on your usage of UTM. So if you're not using UTM, you would just look at the firewall. If you're using UTM or you're thinking about UTM, you'd want to look at the UTM throughput and compare that to your customer's broadband connection. And that's basically it. Feature-wise, they're all otherwise pretty much the same. So some of the features of these security gateways is we've streamlined the ability to create firewall rules and application rules. So it's a lot easier to use than the USG series if you're used to using those. We have smart VPN provisioning. So if you're connecting multiple Nebula sites together with the NSGs, it is super simple to create those VPNs. Basically, all you do is choose whether you're doing site-to-site or hub-to-spoke layout, and then you choose the devices you want to connect together, and we'll go through and create all the firewall rules, policy rules, and certificate exchanges that need to be done for you, so you don't have to worry about that. As I mentioned, we do have UTM functionality there, including antivirus, malware protection, content filtering. We have the ability to create rules for your firewall based on apps. So it's just a pull-down menu. You go through it, find the app, find Facebook Messenger, and then set your policy rules to block or allow or apply QoS based on that, instead of having to know IP addresses and ports and things like that for you. Onwards to switching. We've got a huge number of devices available that work with Nebula on the switch side of things. But the idea behind the Nebula interface, again, is to simplify things here. So you can easily go through and select You can go through there and select multiple ports across multiple devices and configure them all at once, so you don't have to go through switch by switch basis making the configuration changes. We have the ability to do bandwidth control on a per port basis. We've now got advanced IGMP capability, so if you're doing IPTV, such as in a hospitality environment, we've got that functionality there for you to get into the IGMP functionality and do some advanced setting changes. We've also got a built-in IPTV report, which can summarize for you which channels are being watched, which users are watching the most TV, and it also helps troubleshoot any IPTV issues that we sense that are happening, such as jitter or stuttering on those channels, and give you some suggested ideas of how to fix those issues, as well as real-time and historical LAN monitoring. I've gotten some feedback from 2 different people that the stats on the NSG throughputs are wrong. So I apologize for that. I'll take another look at that and update that for future presentations. Going on here to the switches. There we go. So just showing we've got a dedicated series of MSW switches. These are 8 and 24 port PoE and non-PoE switches. These all include 1 year of the Nebula Pro Pack. And then we've got our 1920 V2 and our 1930 series switches. These switches are able to be used with Nebula, or you can use them just using standalone management. So it gives you a lot of flexibility as far as how many ports, up to 48 ports. And your PoE budgets that are available. So huge number of different types of switch configurations you can choose from to be managed with Nebula. We'll move on here to wireless. So one of the things we want to point out here, and this is something that really sets us apart from some of the other access point manufacturers, even some of the higher end guys out there, is we spent a lot of time and engineering effort both to make the product last a long time and to just give you that little extra edge of performance. So when you're talking about solid state components like this, there are 2 major things which cause failure over time. The first one is going to be capacitor failure. Capacitors are little barrels on the PCBA, generally that are filled with salt water. Those tend to leak or boil over or evaporate over time and fail. So all of our capacitors on any model of access point, even our cheap little $80 Nebula Flex access points, is using all solid state components. The other thing that causes failure over time is what we call heat fatigue. It can cause the chips themselves to burn out, although most often the failure is generally in a solder joint, which ends up wearing out due to heat cycles. So we've got a giant heat sink we put in the back of all of our PCBAs, and we've got tons of vent holes in there to help keep the heat out. So that's why we can offer pricing very comparable and in some cases better than Ubiquiti, while offering a lifetime warranty. We're the only offer of 1-year warranty. Is these changes we've made that have been designed specifically to help the hardware last a long time. The other thing we've done is we've optimized for RF performance. So some of the things we've done is we've added additional shielding on the PCBA, more than what you'll see in our competition. Also, we do not mount the antennas onto the PCBA. We have a separate shielded component that the antennas are mounted onto to give them full isolation from the PCBA. So this gives you an extra 2 to 3 dB when it comes to receive sensitivity and noise floor. So this is the difference between no connection and a slow but stable connection on those edge case issues. So it's really helpful, especially in environments that tend to be kind of tough, like warehouses or hospitality, where those edge cases are really important that you have connectivity for those people. This is just a reminder for everyone, if you have questions, do not use chat. Send them in with the Q&A box. Thank you. As far as the interface goes, our wireless LAN interface makes it really easy to set up SSIDs, schedule the SSIDs, do rate limiting, VLANs, and stuff like that. As we talked about earlier, we've got a really flexible captive portal, which allows you a lot of flexibility as far as how the users log in, and allows you a lot of flexibility in how you customize those landing pages to brand them to you or your customer. We've got several different methods of doing load balancing between access points, and a number of options here when it comes to pushing clients to different access points or pushing them to different radios on the access point. We support all the main 802.11, so 802.11K, V, R, we support those. But we've also got some settings that you can tweak in there to help try to smooth the experience for older clients that don't support those newer standards that help with roaming and steering. And of course, up to a year's worth of historical wireless logs and performance metrics that you can look at. So on the access point side of things, we have our Nebula Flex access points. These are our series of access points that for the most part are designed to compete with Ubiquiti. These can be used standalone without Nebula, or can be managed through the Nebula interface. So we've got several different models here. The 1123 AC Pro has a kind of a cool feature in it where you can change the antenna pattern to be optimized either for ceiling mount or wall mount, where most of your access points that are out in the field are only optimized for the one position, which is generally ceiling mount. This gets you the flexibility to switch between those modes based on where you're having to do the installation. Our NWE 1302 is an access point designed specifically for hospitality. It has a built-in smart antenna. And it also has Ethernet ports pass-through on the bottom, including PoE pass-through. So it gives you the ability in a hospitality install to do a single Ethernet drop. This will mount over the wall plate on the wall. And then from here, you can have Ethernet going out to your IPTV set-top box, providing PoE to an IP phone in the room, or providing guest access for wired as well as wireless. We have our Nebula Flex Pro products. These devices can be used standalone. They can be managed with our NXC controllers. They can be managed with our USG and UAG series security gateways, and can be Nebula managed. These include, at the moment, 3 years of ProPack out of the box, and then starting in 2020, it'll go down to just 1 year of ProPack bundled with them. And then we've got our dedicated Nebula access points. So these can only be managed with Nebula. These all include 3 years of the ProPack out of the box, both indoor and outdoor models, smart antenna and non-smart antenna access points. So now we'll start talking about the licenses and how that works. So all Nebula products, including the Nebula Flex products, are license-free Nebula out of the box. We then also offer what's called Professional Pack. This is an additional license that you can buy on an annual basis, or you can buy a perpetual lifetime license. So if you don't want to have to worry about managing renewals, but you know you want the ProPack features, you can just buy the lifetime license. It is locked to the customer org, not to the device itself, so that lifetime license carries over even if you end up swapping out hardware or upgrading hardware that's at that customer location. So the free version of Nebula gives you that zero-touch deployment where you simply need to plug it in and make sure it has internet access and it'll work. It gives you the automatic firmware updates and scheduling. It gives you access to an unlimited number of devices and an unlimited number of customer accounts that you can manage through the cloud. When it comes to logs and monitoring, we keep 7 days worth of logs in the cloud for you. Gives you the captive portal, guest access functionality. Gives you full configuration access to most features of the Nebula products themselves. It gives you 5 admin accounts that you can use, 2-factor authentication, and of course our lifetime warranties. Upgrading to the Professional Pack gets you a year's worth of log information. It gets you automatic email alerts and reports that you can set up. So those are both alerts like, hey, you know, this device has been offline for 10 minutes. Maybe something's going on. Or alternately, you can set up reports that either get emailed to yourself or to your customer that let them know what's going on the network. And those can be branded with your logo. So that's something else that's included in the Pro Pack. With a Pro Pack, you get an unlimited number of admin accounts. So if you're a larger MSP or you want to provide admin accounts both for your own employees and for maybe the IT guy or the owner at the customer site, that gives you the benefit. If 5 is not enough, the Pro Pack gets you an unlimited number of admin accounts. Pro Pack gets you the automatic topology view. It gets you a large number of reports that can be generated from the security gateway side of things, from the switch side of things, that IPTV report we were talking about, the audit and change logs. So those are all Pro Pack features. For a lot of customers, you don't need those Pro Pack features. You can use the free version of Nebula. But if you need or want some of these additional features, you'll want to upgrade to the Pro Pack. And then we've got another license, which is the security license. So the security license is separate from the Nebula Control Center. So that includes the application-based firewall rules, intrusion detection and prevention, antivirus, and content filtering. And that's only available on an annual basis. So it's just trying to help make things, you understand things. So anything that's Nebula Flex or marketed as Nebula Flex does not include any Pro Pack licenses. Nebula Flex Pro includes 3 years of Pro Pack on these 2 models just for this year. It's a promo we're running. Going to next year, it'll include 1 year. And any of our dedicated Nebula hardware, so the NAP access points, the NSW switches, the NSG gateways, I got ahead of myself there. The NAP access points all include 3 years out of the box. The NSW switches and the NSG gateways include 1 year out of the box. So the other thing we do, which is a little bit different, is if you're upgrading to the Pro Pack, is by default we do what's called co-termination. So basically what happens is, you go out, you roll out the customer, you give them 10 access points. Those have a year's worth of the Pro Pack license, we'll say. Then 6 months down the road, they expand, they decide they want more coverage out in the warehouse, et cetera, so they buy some more access points. Well, with a lot of the other vendors out there that are offering some sort of license-based management functionality, whether it's controller-based or cloud-based, you end up in a situation where you've got licenses expiring at different times, right? You've got the first set of APs expiring 12 months after you bought them, then you've got the second set of access points expiring 12 months after you bought them. So with lots of customers out there, it quickly becomes a hassle trying to stay on top of your licenses. So with Nebula, what we do in that same situation is we convert these 12-month licenses into points, put those points in a pool, and then evenly distribute them across all of the devices on the customer network. So that way everything is expiring at the exact same time. So that way for each customer, you've only got one expiration date, no matter how many devices they have or when they installed those devices. We've also got a neat little tool on the web store or on the Nebula interface you can go into. If you want all of your customers, say, expiring at a certain date, just for ease of management, or maybe alternately, you want to space your customers out so each group block of customers is expiring in a different quarter. For ease of management, you can do that with Nebula. You just put in the date you want that customer site to expire. They'll tell you how many additional points you need, and then you can buy those through distribution or through us, so you can have everything expire always on that same date. Hope that makes sense. I know some people get sort of hung up on that. So just some common questions we get with Nebula. Where is Nebula hosted? Where is this cloud interface? So we haven't done like Meraki and some of the other guys and tried to build our own cloud or use shards and things like that. Instead, what we've done is we're using Amazon Web Services probably the most reliable, most well-known of the commercial web hosting services out there. So that's who we're using for Nebula. So as long as Amazon's up, our Nebula interface should be up and running for you. We get a lot of questions about PCI and HIPAA compliance. And the short version of that is basically the way Nebula is set up, it is considered out of band, the cloud interface portion of it. So none of the LAN traffic is forwarded to the cloud. No internet traffic goes to the cloud. The only communication between the cloud and the customer site is the management interface, letting the devices know, hey, there's been some configuration changes. You need to accept those. You need to download those changes. Or alternately, the device is uploading to the cloud the most recent log information. So for those reasons, the cloud portion is considered out of band. And the LAN devices themselves are in band, but we do comply with both HIPAA and PCI and GDRP. We've spent a lot of time, money, and effort in getting our Nebula platform and the Nebula devices with the correct certifications and complying with all the local rules that are out there. So if you've got a customer who's got, sites in Asia, sites in Canada, sites in Europe, you don't need to worry about that. Nebula is compliant with all of the existing rules and regulations in all of those different countries. So you're good to go, whether we're talking PCI and HIPAA in the US, GDRP in Europe, some of the other ones that are out there. I will say this note, though, on PCI, depending on who is doing the compliance scans, you may need to contact us by opening a ticket in Nebula or calling into tech support to have us disable the Easy VPN feature fully. Some sites it's just fine with, but other sites, again, just depending on which company and which software they're using to do the scans, may flag that, and we can disable that for you. We will be adding it to the Nebula GUI, I think hopefully in June or July, so you don't have to open a ticket. But for now, if you run into that issue with a PCI compliance scan, we can solve it real quick just by opening a ticket. So another question we get, if you've already been doing sort of MSP type services for a while, you might already be using something like SolarWinds or Zabbix or Nagios. So the question is, well, what happens with that? And so the short answer is you can continue using it. In addition to the Nebula cloud interface, all the Nebula hardware offers full SNMP and syslog support. So you can still use SolarWinds or whatever to monitor your hardware. You aren't forced into a solution where you're having to use Nebula for half your network and SolarWinds for everything else on the network. You can do both. You don't have to swap out the network and make everything on the network Nebula compatible. We play just fine with all other networking hardware out there. It's just the Nebula management interface is only available on Zyxel Nebula compatible hardware. So we get a lot of questions on how do we compare against different competitors that are out there. So I'll go through this kind of quickly. Again, we can send this to you if you want to actually drill down in it. And we've in fact got a much more in-depth version of some of this information. Generally, though, when we're talking from a feature perspective, Zyxel Nebula most closely matches up with the Cisco Meraki product. In this comparison here, we have Ubiquity on there. Ubiquity offers a number of different solutions from CloudKey. So in this one, we're specifically comparing against the Unify Elite cloud management service. So Nebula works with our APs, switches, and gateways. Some of our competition like Ruckus and Arrowhive, it doesn't have that full broad selection of stuff. We are fully plug and play. There should be no local configuration unless you need to manually set a fixed IP address. Ubiquity, you still have to go in there and point it towards the cloud. Only us and Meraki offer the co-termination of licenses. And with Meraki, you specifically have to ask them to convert the site to that. Only we are offering lifetime perpetual licenses for the more advanced features. There is no monthly fees that need to be paid. A big thing here, especially comparing us against Meraki, is if your professional pack license lapses, It simply rolls back to the free version where you still have access to control and manage your devices. With Meraki, you lose all management functionality as soon as that license expires. We have that built-in network topology view on the Pro Pack, that configuration change and audit logs, just us and Meraki offering that. Cloud authentication database, IDP and application-based patrols, it's just us and Meraki. The ability to take photos of where the device has been installed and place it on a map, it's just us and Meraki. We also offer, I think, the best logs, it's just us and Meraki as far as logging events and data retention. So we compare very nicely with Meraki. As far as feature set goes, we obviously don't have quite the breadth of hardware that Cisco Meraki does, but we're considerably cheaper. Like I said, basic features are free, and something like an AP license with a Pro Pack runs you around $35 per AP per year, versus $150 to $200 for a Meraki solution. So some other common questions. How long does it take for changes to take effect? So this is probably one of the biggest issues we run into. If you're not used to using a cloud service, you're used to hitting the apply button, and a few seconds later, the changes having been applied. So with the cloud, you need to wait for the device to pull the cloud to see if there's been any configuration changes. Generally, that's going to take less than 2 minutes, but it is something to keep in mind when you're troubleshooting something. You change the SSID, it's going to take, generally 2 minutes or so before you see that SSID change. If there's something going on with your network connection, packets are getting dropped, it may take up to 5 minutes for those changes to take effect. So just be aware of that. People always are asking, well, I don't want to use the cloud, can't I just, SSH into the device or log into the local GUI? And the answer is no. All management of, when you have the device in Nebula mode, all management needs to be done through the Nebula Control Center. The one exception to that is fixed IPs. If you're using fixed IP addresses and you don't want to use, static DHCP to do that, you do need to set that static IP address locally. So you can log in and do that. You can also see through the GUI whether there's connectivity issues, whether that device is able to reach out to the cloud or not. Another question here is, do I need to open any ports on my firewall? And the general rule is no. All of the Nebula connections are being bound from the local devices. So we're not punching a hole inbound to reach those devices. They're reaching out to the cloud periodically to check for updates and to upload information. So for the vast majority of networks, there are no ports that need to be opened, no port forwarding that needs to be done. It can transverse net and double net just fine. So how often are updates done? We're updating Nebula Control Center on a weekly basis. So that's the cloud portion. When it comes to updates, we try to do 2 to 3 major updates a year, and we try to hold off on changes to minimize the number of firmware updates that get pushed out. For sure, no more than once per quarter, but generally 2 or 3 times a year. So we just had the last major rollout was in February, March timeframe. The next major rollout will be June, July, and then we'll probably have another major one in Q4. So another question we get is, what happens if the internet and cloud goes down? Everything continues to function just fine until the cloud comes back online. LAN traffic continues to be LAN traffic. You may lose some of the logs. If it's a really long outage, some of the log information will exceed the local storage on the devices themselves. But otherwise, there's no issues. We've heard from other people with certain other cloud services that after a few hours, things start to get wonky. Not a problem here. Everything will continue to function just fine until the LAN comes back up. So how do you try Nebula out? We've got a couple different options for you. The first one and the easiest one is just go to nebula.zyxel.com. We have a demo site set up. We've got the login information. It's visible on the login screen. You just copy and paste that in, and you can see the live demo. All of the features and functionality are enabled, so you can see everything there. If you are one of our reseller partners and you have joined our partner program, talk to your sales rep. We can get you a 60-day demo kit for you to test out and play with Nebula yourself, whether it's in your own lab or at a customer site. And if you like what you're seeing there, we can probably offer you NFR pricing on that demo kit for you to keep it rather than send it back to us. So that is it. So I'm going to open it up to questions. If you have questions, again, send them in through the Q&A box. If you have feedback you want to give me offline or questions you want to ask me offline, my email's there on the screen, seanr@zyxel.com. And feel free to reach out to your salesperson also with feedback. We're trying to do weekly webinars now on different topics, but we need your help and your suggestions on what you'd like to see covered as far as webinars go. So my next webinar that I am doing is going to be a Wireless 101 webinar. I know Tri is doing a number of different Tech Talk Tuesdays where he addresses certain different issues. So let us know if you have any ideas or feedback on things you think would be a nice short webinar to do, whether it's general topic or whether it's specific application based. Email me or email your salesperson and let us know. So I'll start going through some of the questions we've got here. So we've got a question here of troubleshooting network on site with the WAN down. How much information can you glean from the Nebula hardware? If the WAN's down, not a lot, because you do need the WAN. You do need the access to the WAN to be able to see the Nebula interface and logs. I mean, the good news is if the WAN's down, it's not something that's happening on your local network. It's generally something that's happening between the gateway and the internet. So it's probably the router or more likely the modem or whatever the interface is, or something upstream from where you're at. So another question here is, how is Nebula segregating guest Wi-Fi without using VLANs? It's a good question. It's from Michael. So the way that works, and this is actually a feature we've had in our standalone and controller managed access points for over a decade now, is a feature called Layer 2 isolation. So it allows you to take an SSID and basically it will block all traffic in and out of that of devices that are connected to that SSID, except for a whitelist of MAC addresses that you provide them. So you can provide them access to the gateway, just that gateway MAC address, and so they'll only be able to communicate out to the internet through that gateway, keeping them off the local network. If it sees any local device that's not on that whitelist trying to communicate with those clients, or those clients trying to reach out to any IP that's not associated with that specific whitelisted MAC address, it will drop the packet. So there's no way for those guests to reach a network resource that you haven't explicitly given them permission to, and vice versa. So you can use it also to give them access to like a local network storage or a local network printer. So, you know, guests can come in, get internet access, print stuff out, but they won't be able to get onto your corporate network. We've had a mixed bag results with PCI, with who's doing the PCI audit, whether they'll be like that or not for PCI compliance. But outside of meeting PCI compliance, it works really good for guest networks. We've got somebody here asking if we have a PoE camera system, and we do not, nor do we currently have any plans for a PoE camera system. We used to offer PoE cameras. What was that, about five years ago, maybe 4 years ago? Our experience with PoE cameras, and this is feedback we're getting now from a lot of people trying to use the Meraki cloud cameras, is that camera usage is really a specialized area, design and usage, and it's not something that we are able to compete with, I guess I should put it that way. I know a lot of people use Aris cameras and they work just fine with Nebula, providing PoE power to them. We've also coming up soon here, at least at launch, I don't believe it's Nebula enabled. We're going to have a line of PoE switches specifically optimized for doing IP cameras. So it's got some cool abilities, such as the ability for the switch to detect that the camera is no longer transmitting video, and then automatically rebooting the camera by power cycling PoE just on that one port. Also has the ability, if for some reason the switch needs to be rebooted, it will continue to provide PoE power to the cameras even during the reboot process. So the cameras themselves don't have to reboot just because the switch is rebooting. A number of other features that are specifically optimized just for IP camera deployments. So if you're doing a lot of IP cameras, that might be something to look at. Let's see if we've got any more questions here. One more question from Joseph. Again, if you have any questions, send them in using the Q&A box. Does Nebula Control Center have a port usage chart for switches to compare port activity? That is a good question. I want to say the answer to that is yes. But off the top of my head, it's been a while since I've played around with the switch interface. So I could be wrong, but I think the answer to that is yes. You can certainly log into nebula.zyxel.com, log in with the interface there, the demo account, and you can take a look at the switches that we've got deployed on that to see if it has the report that you're looking for. If it's not there, send me an email and let me know what's missing, and I will add that to the feature request queue. Chances are it's already there, but we'll go ahead and let them know someone else is asking for it as well. So someone's asking if there is a non-PoE version of the Nebula Flux 8-port coming soon. I don't believe so. I know there's a 8-port non-PoE of the dedicated NSW, but I don't think there's any new models. If the 1920 V2 8-port is only available in PoE, then that's probably all we've got for that small of port count for the moment. That may be changing as we roll out those IP camera switches here in the near future. I am not seeing any more questions. Go ahead and continue to type them in. I will hang out for a few more minutes, but for everyone else who joined us today, thank you for coming out. Again, my email's on there. Let me know ideas for other topics. Any feedback on this webinar, how to improve it, make it more engaging, more interesting to you, let us know.